Mario, I received a letter from the IRS. Have you all been paying your taxes?
I believe so.
Mario, this is a series. You need to be paying your taxes.
Why?
Eh?
Why should I be paying my taxes? I am a Super Mario. I save the princess. I step on the Goomba. I know I pay my taxes.
Mario, you have to pay your taxes.
I know I have to pay my taxes.
Mario, you have to pay your taxes. I mean, the income tax on all the gold coins over the last 40 years is going to bury you.
Let them try, Luigi.
Huh? Oh, Mario, is it a gun?
I know my rights.
Mario,
no,
you cannot shoot the IRS. It is not a
I am
regular
Mario.
blade. You
I
cannot
took
just
the
shoot them.
Goomba.
You must
I
pay
save
your
the
taxes,
princess.
Mario.
I play
Mario,
tennis.
please listen to reason.
Mario, I'm here to collect your
Mario!
The Lord
Oh,
is my shepherd.
Mario!
I shall not want.
Mamma mia, I'm a fucking
I shall not want.
Welcome back to Inside Four Walls. I'm your host, James Maston, and things are getting a little bit interesting. Now, a lot of the trials, and a lot of the votes you're going to see, and a lot of the bills passed, and a lot of the moves you see from the House of Representatives will be for display purposes only, but the fact is, they're still showing that they're willing to do something. Now, they don't have Congress behind them, they don't have Senate behind them, and they don't have the President behind them. But the House of Representatives is still showing and flexing their muscles, which is a little bit more than I thought they actually would. Kevin McCarthy, since the last time we talked, has been sworn in. But Kevin McCarthy conceded so much ground to the Freedom Caucus that he's essentially owned by Matt Gaetz. And even though he surrendered everything in the world to the Freedom Caucus, Matt Gaetz still voted present and never voted for McCarthy. Amazing. But it wasn't only him, it was Boebert and a lot of other people still. But when he rang that gavel down at the end of his first day as Speaker of House, he said promises made, promises kept. So let's get into it. House GOP passes repeal of IRS funding, boosts as its first bill in the majority. House Republicans fulfilled a key campaign promise on Monday, passing legislation to rescind the bulk of IRS funding boost signed into law last year, making the first bill passed by GOP-controlled House in this Congress. This is done. This is a sealed deal. Those thousands and thousands and thousands of new IRS agents are not there anymore. They've been fucking kaput. And I think it's fair to say you should leave in the comments a little thank you to Matt Gaetz. So, let's scroll down and get into it. We have an article from the Tyler Paper. Not familiar with this outlet, but it's a high factuality, lean right, 1 day ago. Other ones from 2 days ago. Again, I was away for 2 days and a lot's happened. So let's talk about the first thing that's actually got accomplished with this new GOP-led, House of Representatives. So over here at Tyler Morning Telegraph. In First Act, GOP-controlled House takes aim at IRS funding by Laura Weiss. GQ roll call. Let me zoom in a little bit so I have an easier time reading this because I'm blind as shit. Hold on. Published January 10th, 2023. Updated 22 hours ago. Oh, okay, so this was updated relatively recently. So, okay, let's move on. Washington. The new Republican-controlled House passed a bill to claw back $71.5 billion in funding for the IRS that was part of the Democrats' climate, tax, and healthcare reconciliation law passed last year. The party line 221 to 210 vote was the first legislative act of the new Congress, showing Republicans' interest in providing their opposition to Democrats. In proving their opposition to Democrats' effort to boost the tax code enforcement and crack down on tax avoidance. Now, this is going to make the Democrats defend the IRS, and that's going to be just fucking serendipity. So when you're talking to your little Democrat buddies and friends, hypothetical straw man talking to your straw man friends, you can ask them, why are you defending the IRS? And they'll say, well, I'm not. Well, every Democrat you're talking about right now voted for the IRS. Who knows? I bet AOC would go against this. AOC would probably vote alongside the GOP on this one. She was the only Democrat to vote against the omnibus spending bill. So AOC apparently will go rogue if it apparently enriches the state occasionally, apparently. Talk about a random wild card. Republicans' bill doesn't appear to have a path to becoming law, with Democrats still in control of the Senate and White House and supportive of the IRS. Senate Finance Chair Ron Wyden, a Democrat from Oregon, said in a statement Monday that the bill would aid, quote, wealthy tax cheats, and Senate Democrats, quote, will not entertain it. Yeah, but your entire party was funded by is funded by George Soros and up until very recently FTX and Sam Bankman-Fried. So you want to talk about tax dodging millionaires and billionaires? Maybe not. I mean, it seems like it's more of a political protection. Who's in power protects who's with them. So you have a Republican Party, Republican Party in power. The Republicans are going to protect other Republicans. You have a Democratic Party. Democrats are going to protect other Democrats. It's sort of just the lay of the land. But with deadlines coming later this year to address the debt limit and fund the government for the fiscal year of 2024, the issue could arise as GOP demands in negotiations. Yeah, who would have thought winning they won the House of Representatives by the thinnest of margins. Who would have thought that would have been such a good thing, because McCarthy could not win unless he had this little clutch group of people vote for him. And if it was a big red wave, Kevin McCarthy would have been sworn in that quick with no negotiations given. Wild. Republican Rep. Dan Bishop of North Carolina acknowledged that reality during an appearance on the Glenn Beck program, saying the bill is unlikely to clear the Senate, quote, unless you use Holm Rule to put something in a bigger appropriations bill. Bishop was referring to a provision in what the new rules package allowing amendments to spending bills, as Republicans could use to fire or cut pay to specific employees. Ooh, it's a nice little bit of leverage to have. Democrats' budget reconciliation law included almost $80 billion in mandatory funding for the IRS over the next decade. Democrats argued it would help force wealthy taxpayers to pay. We'll get into this. To pay what they owe. And it was part of a package to offset funding, to offset that funded clean energy and health care investment. Republicans' bill to rescind much of that funding would cost the federal government $114 billion over the next decade, according to the Congressional Budget Office. You want to keep saying that they're going after... the IRS is only going after the wealthy. They're only going after the billionaires who want to pay taxes. Interesting. We covered it when this article first came out, so we won't read through the whole thing. It will be in the description below, however. Ex-IRS whistleblower says, middle class targeted under inflationary bill. We have a brief video here. We'll check this video out. I'm sure they'll do a pretty good job summing up for, what Fox News... Just for the record, Fox News and CNN are owned by, the same people, right? But moving on.
IRS lawyer and whistleblower Bill Hank joins us now. Bill, we've been really looking forward to this interview for a while now. This weekend, I spoke with a lot of people, and there was definitely some gallows humor with regard to this. These aren't one percenters. They're just worried that the IRS is going to go after them and their normal lives. How bad will this get for the middle class?
I think the best way to put it is the IRS will go after people with enough money to be targets, but not enough money to hire a Washington lobbyist. And the overall problem is that the IRS is simply not accountable, and the IRS is influenced by Washington lobbyists. And a central problem is the Inspector General, TIGTA. They are a captive entity of IRS management. I mean, for example, I gave TIGTA the list of 9 witnesses, IRS witnesses, to substantive misconduct 5 years ago, almost exactly 5 years ago. And none of them have been contacted. And when I asked 5 of them directly if they had been contacted, they all laughed, because it was preposterous that TIGTA would, contact, IRS witnesses to misconduct. And the IRS management takes advantage of this. They use TIGTA and say, well, if there are any issues, talk to TIGTA, but they know darn well that TIGTA will cover for them.
I've spent.
All right, we'll just read a little bit of this article right here. Ooh, pardon me. William Henk, a former Internal Revenue Service lawyer who was forced out by making allegations of internal malfeasance, said the government will target middle-class income Americans with new audits under Inflation Reduction Act. Hennick, who worked for the IRS for 30 years until departing in 2017, slammed the IRS and others who have argued additional funding would only result in an increased audit for billionaires and corporations. The Inflation Reduction Act, which President Joe Biden signed into law, would nearly double the IRS's budget, appropriating an additional $79 billion to the agency over the next decade. Quote, the idea that they're going to open things up and only go after these big billionaires and large corporations is quite frankly bullshit, Hennick told Fox News Business in an interview. Quote, It's not going to happen. They're going to give themselves bonuses and promotions and really nice conferences. Quote, the big corporations and the billionaires are probably sitting back laughing right now, he continued. Hennick added that he thought it was, quote, insane to double the agency's budget. He said the IRS will target businesses who don't have enough money to hire Washington lobbyists. I'm just against defunding the government, regardless of the branch or division of government. But let's get back into the article here. Democrats' budget reconciliation law included almost $80 billion in mandatory funding for the IRS. Read that part. Republicans' bill to rescind much of that funding would cost the federal government $114 billion over the next decade, according to the Congressional Budget Office. Treasury Secretary Janet L. Yellen directed the IRS not to use any of the money to increase audits of households or small businesses making under $400,000 per year, after President Joe Biden pledged not to raise taxes on people with income below that threshold. That didn't really work out because taxes have been on the rise unilaterally across the board. So, much like Walker Bush before him, read my lips. Bullshit. House Republicans' legislation would allow wealthy and corporate tax evaders to continue avoiding tax owed, increasing the burden on honest, hardworking families who pay their taxes with every paycheck, a Treasury spokesperson said in a statement, citing a plunge in IRS audits of millionaires over the last decade and the need for funding to narrow the gap between taxes owed and paid to the federal government. In a separate statement of administration policy, the White House said Biden would veto the bill if it somehow made it to his desk. Republicans have decried Democrats' IRS funding, saying it would still lead to more enforcement against everyday Americans and small businesses. House Ways and Means Committee member Adrian Smith of Nebraska introduced Republicans' bill last Congress. He said in a statement at the time that the IRS had lost touch with its mission of serving the taxpayers. Quote, American families don't need more audits and red tape, and this bill will help ensure hardworking taxpayers receive satisfactory customer service without having to fear a supercharged IRS, Smith said. Just make taxation theft again. I have a hat for it. When asked whether rescinding much of the $80 billion could be a GOP demand in fiscal negotiations this year, Smith said constituents are frustrated with IRS operations, so Republicans need to be diligent in our efforts to bring about positive change to the IRS. The legislation would leave in place almost $3.2 billion for taxpayer services and over $4.7 billion for modernization of the IRS dated systems and technology. Both are typically accounts with bipartisan backing and help. Move this a little bit closer here. Okay. Modernizing systems and technology. Both are typically accounts with bipartisan backing and help fund initiatives to improve customer service. The bill would rescind unobligated balances, including 45.6 billion devoted to enforcement and 25.3 billion for operations support and other smaller targets, including the following. Point 1. 15 million for task forces designed to free IRS run online tax filing systems. Point 2. 403 million for the Treasury Inspector General for tax administrations. And 3. 104 million for Treasurer's Office of Tax Policy. This is money being taken away from these departments, by the way. You'd love to see it. 153 million for the U.S. Tax Court. And the last point is 50 million for Treasury to oversee support of the IRS as it rolls out the new mandatory funding. And that is the end of this article from the Tyler Morning Telegraph. Article by Lauren Weiss of GQ. Roll call. Now we're going to hop over here to the Post-Millennial. Breaking. GOP-led House votes to end funding for 87,000 IRS agents. Nice. During his opening remarks, Speaker McCarthy pledged that the first bill brought to the chamber would be to repeal the funding for the 87,000 IRS agents. But from the Post-Millennial, article is by... I don't see a name. Article just appears to be by the Post-Millennial. Now...
their homes. This was a serious terrorist organization.
Yeah, that has nothing to do with what I'm talking about, so let's move on. House of Representatives fulfilled Speaker Kevin McCarthy's promise to prevent the Internal Revenue Service from hiring 87,000 new agents and conducting new audits on Americans by voting to rescind over $70 billion in funding to the agency Monday night. The Family and Small Business Taxpayer Protection Act, sponsored by Rep. Adrian Smith, a Republican from Nebraska, we just talked about him, and Rep. Michael Steele, a Republican from California. Michael Steele is actually kind of cool. Passed by a vote of 221 to 210 and rescinds funding that could have been used to double the agency's current size as well as conduct new audits on Americans. The bill rollbacks billions of dollars in funding for the IRS that was approved in the last year's Inflation Reduction Act. However, the legislation does leave in place funding for customer service and improvements to IT services. Is this related to what we're talking about? Okay, that's a full to our program. I'm just going to move on. From Steve Scalise, breaking. House just voted to repeal funding for Biden's 87,000 new IRS agents. Every Democrat voted no. Tells you all you need to know. It really fucking does. The Inflation Reduction Act designated $80 billion to the agency over 10 years. Over half of the funds were intended to crack down on tax evasion, and tax funds would have gone towards filing 87,000 positions, filling 87,000 positions at the IRS. Breaking House Republicans just passed a bill to repeal Joe Biden's 87,000 new IRS agents. The IRS audits the poor 5 times the rate of the rich. Absolutely true. On Monday, the Congressional Budget Office scored the bill and said the legislation would increase the debt by $114 billion over a decade. Smith's office said to Fox News regarding the score, quote, Congressional Democrats and the Biden administration have made it clear that up to 90% of the new audits will target middle-class families and small businesses. This score again demonstrates the extent to which they are plundering the working-class Americans in order to hand billions of dollars out to profitable businesses buy electric trucks for their fleet, fuel for their airlines, and install large-scale wind and solar across American landscapes, because that's really working out for Texas. Kevin McCarthy, right here from the Post-Millennial, to tweet, I know the night is late, but when we come back, our very first bill will be to will repeal the funding for the 87,000 new IRS agents. Let's watch right here.
I know the night is late, but when we come back, Our very first bill will repeal the funding for 87,000 new IRS.
Promises made, promises kept, boy. I love the misery on these Democrats' faces. The vote comes after McCarthy, a Republican from California, secured the House speakership Friday night after 15 rounds of voting. Lol, making him a historic-setting loser. During his opening remarks as Speaker, McCarthy pledged that the first bill brought to the chamber would be to repeal the funding for the 87,000 new IRS agents. And we have a tweet here from Kevin McCarthy himself. House Republicans just voted unanimously to repeal the Democrats' army of 87,000 IRS agents. This was our first act in the new Congress because government should work for you, not against you. Promises made, promises kept. You know, for a guy who doesn't like Trump, you sure seem to be quoting him right now. Now, let's hop over here to KTLA5. House GOP members aim to abolish the IRS and eliminate the federal tax income. Ooh, buddy, how?
87,000.
This is a local affiliate. I'm not exactly sure.
With Kevin McCarthy making history and becoming the Speaker of the House after 15 drama-fueled voting sessions, he stated his first act as Speaker is to eliminate the additional funding passed with the Inflation Act to hire an additional 87,000 IRS agents whom critics argue will go after small businesses and everyday people who fail to properly report their income. So people aren't really behind that. Instead, House Republicans are introducing a bill titled the Fair Tax Act, which aims to completely abolish the IRS and replace the federal income tax scheme as we know it with a national consumption tax. The bill is extremely unlikely to pass through Congress. However, a boy can dream. A national consumption tax is essentially when you go buy stuff. And so instead of spending 10% tax like we experience here in California when you buy that new Mac or that iPad or those Beats Pro, whatever the heck, that tax will likely be a little higher, but you won't have a federal income tax. So it's something.
Let's move on. After Kevin McCarthy's historic and contentious election as Speaker of the House, he announced that his first order of business is to reverse funding allocated for President Joe Biden's inflation relief bill that introduced the hiring of 87,000 new IRS agents. The bill, whoa, ooh, sorry. The bill, first introduced by Georgia Republican Buddy Carter and called the Fair Tax Act, aims to cut the hiring of these agents and even goes as far as to end funding for the entire IRS as a government agency. Furthermore, the bill seeks to eliminate the federal income tax scheme as we know it and replace it with a simplified national consumption tax. Instead of adding 87,000 new IRS agents to weaponize the IRS against small business owners and middle-class Americans, the bill will eliminate the need for the department entirely by simplifying the tax code with provisions that work for the American people and encourage the growth and innovation. Rep. Carter said in a press release obtained by Fox News. I don't know why I said 5, my bad. The bill has significant hurdles to overcome to becoming law, and is unlikely to pass both houses and Congress. Now, here's the thing. I'm just happy to see it. And now we're going to end on one of my favorite punching bags of a news outlet. Fox News. Oops. Hold on. Silence. Just for the last article, and a little bit of a victory lap. Why not? Biden adamantly opposes GOP bill to abolish the IRS, eliminate income tax, and says burden will fall on middle class. Yeah, because without an IRS, we're so hindered. House to vote on Georgia Rep. Buddy Carter's reintroduction Fair Tax Act. I have a little bit of video here. Let's see what this is.
I want to start by wishing you all a very Merry Christmas, but a Christmas tree bill just passed on Capitol Hill was hardly a festive occasion. The media scrambled to keep up with this nearly $2 trillion measure that the Wall Street Journal called the ugliest omnibus bill ever. 4,000 plus pages that most members never had time to read, while MSNBC said Democrats should be ashamed for not fighting harder for COVID relief. Journalists dutifully reported that without action, the U.S. government would have defaulted. So Mitch McConnell and Chuck Schumer joined in embracing this behemoth. Politico and others kept updating what was in, what was out. There were even opposing amendments on border security that just canceled each other out. Democrats replaced a 19th century law with one spelling out that a vice president has no power to block electoral votes, as Donald Trump pressured Mike Pence to do. Some Republicans wanted to ban Chinese-owned TikTok on national security grounds, but had to settle for borrowing it on government devices. There was $45 billion for Ukraine, more than President Biden had asked for, and all flavors of pork, like a bailout for Maine's lobster business, not to mention extra security for former House speakers after that horrible attack on Nancy Pelosi's husband. It's been an absolute blur as journalists try to keep up with this ever-changing monstrosity, and lawmakers just wanted to race home for Christmas. I'm Howard Kurtz, and this is Media Buzz.
Okay.
Ahead, is Elon Musk really giving up his job as Twitter's chief executive? And the incredibly
feels, in a sense, like the least of Trump's worries, but we're going to focus on it anyway.
Joining us now to analyze the coverage.
Yeah, I'm just moving on. I was hoping we'd have something to say about what we were covering, but I guess not. Exclusive. President Joe Biden, quote, adamantly opposes a Republican bill that the House of Representatives plans to vote on that would abolish the Internal Revenue Service and eliminate the national income tax. And he warns that the bill would end up raising taxes on the middle class. The House is set to vote on Georgia Republican Rep. Buddy Carter's Reintroduction Fair Tax Act, which aims to reel in the IRS and remove the national income tax and other taxes, and replace them with a single consumption tax. So a blanket flat tax on every single item. Versus a gross government agency which, at the whim, raises and lowers tax rates. Yeah, I'm not really seeing where the downside here is, but okay. Leave a complaint in the comment below. But the White House is warning that the legislation would, quote, overwhelmingly shift the federal tax burden onto the American middle class and working people, while simultaneously causing prices to spike up across the board. No, you keep the prices where they are and you allow branches of the government to shut down. President Biden adamantly opposes the House Republicans' plan to force an unprecedented tax hike onto the American middle class families in exchange for yet more tax welfare for the rich and big corporations. White House Deputy Press Secretary Andrew Bates told Fox News Digital on Wednesday, quote, the president's top priority is to make more progress cutting costs for the American people, who broadly support its effort to have a multinational corporation and the richest taxpayers pay their fair share, Bates said. Weird to say while you're completely owned by them. The White House cited former President George W. Bush's panel, I fucking hate that guy, on federal tax reform, which funded the lower and middle tax income families, quote, would be especially hard hit by standalone retail sales. Standalone retail sales tax. The White House said that the, quote, theme of tax handouts to the wealthy on the backs of the middle class is fast becoming a theme for the new Congress. A theme that the White House said voters rejected in the midterm elections. Quote, we need to fight inflation together and stand up for working families, not worsen inflation and then raise taxes on everyone but the top as a result of backroom deals, Bates told Fox News. The plan for a vote on Carter's bill as part of a deal between House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, a Republican from California, and members of the House Freedom Caucus, as he sought to gain their support in his bid for the gavel. Quote, instead of adding 87,000 new IRS agents to weaponize the IRS against small business owners and the middle-class Americans. This bill will eliminate the need for the department entirely by simplifying the tax code with provisions that work for the American people and encourage growth and innovation, Carter told Fox News Digital. Quote, armed, unelected bureaucrats should not have more power over your paycheck than you do, based. Specifically, the bill gets rid of the national personal and corporate income tax and abolishes the IRS. Ooh, baby. You know, the IRS started off like the Secret Service was originally the first IRS agents. They were like, I don't know, it's complicated history. One was meant to be like the bodyguard, and the other one was meant to be like the tax man, and the tax man ended up becoming the bodyguard. The history of the Secret Service is a little bit more convoluted. I shouldn't even try to bring it up. It's too complicated. But let's move on. Which is slated to hire thousands of new staff over the next decade unless congressional Republicans can stop it. And implements a national sales tax. The bill also gets rid of the death, gift, and payroll taxes, and it would replace the current tax code with a national consumption tax. 11 members have sponsored the bill, including Rep. Kat Cammack, a Republican from Florida, Rep. Jeff Duncan, a Republican from South Carolina, and Rep. Bob Good, a Republican from Virginia, Rep. Andrew Clyde, a Republican from Georgia, and House Freedom Caucus Chairman Rep. Scott Perry, a Republican from Pennsylvania. The bill illustrates the hardline stance House Republicans are taking with the Biden administration and its push to expand the federal government, including the new funding that would expand the IRS. The House of Representatives Monday evening voted to rescind more than $70 billion in tax funding to the IRS, fulfilling McCarthy's campaign promise to prevent the agency from hiring tens of thousands of new agents and conducting new audits on Americans. The bill, dubbed the Family and Small Business Taxpayer Protection Act, and sponsored by Rep. Adrian Smith of Nebraska, a Republican, and Rep. Michael Steele, a Republican from California, passed the House with 221 to 210. The legislation would roll back billions of dollars of funding for the IRS approved in the Inflation Reduction Act last year, but leaves in place funding for customer services and improvements to IT services. The bill rescinds any funding that could be used to conduct new audits on Americans and funding that would double the agency's current size. The Inflation Reduction Act granted an $80 billion boost to the IRS over a 10-year period, with more than half of those funds approved, with the intention of helping the agency to crack down on tax evasion. And that is the end of this article. What a wild first couple days for the new Congress, can I just say? And it's already a lot more than I expected. We did get a large chunk of money withdrawn and defunded from the IRS. We got the IRS defunded to a large scale, and now they're trying to bring up a bill that would just completely abolish the IRS. Now, the bill to abolish the IRS absolutely will not go anywhere, unfortunately, but still, it's a symbolic victory, and I will fucking take it. That being said, this is Inside Four Walls. I've been James Masson, and I shall catch you guys later. Deuces.